So if you remember, so last class, I think the last week, okay, so we have almost closed our compression members, then the column splices also, okay, so that problem, and I think last week we had a tutorial also, okay, where you have solved on column splices. So with this, as far as this course is concerned, say, so the compression member is point whatever we have covered, okay, so these are the some questions I asked you, like the checklist, okay, so which we do after every this one, so that if you are able to answer this, then you are doing fine, just to assess yourself itself, okay. And now I think up to 14, so now anybody tell me, see, what is the basic philosophy behind the built up column? That lacings and battens, so what is it, why do we do that one? Now, why do we do this? Why do we require lacings and battens? What is the main advantage?
We use built-up columns to increase the moment of inertia.
Excellent. Okay, so moment of inertia along which axis? You have a major axis, you have a minor axis. So anyway, one is fine, but other direction, whichever is weak, say. So you make the spacing such that it is fine. So excellent. Okay. And now, what is the slenderness ratio of laced and battened columns? So for a lacing column, what is the slenderness ratio? So how much you increase, the slenderness ratio compared to a solid column?
1.05.
That is a 5% increase. Then battens?
10% increase.
10% increase. Okay, so that is how we say we take. Why do we increase this one? So why slenderness ratio is increased? Nah. So what is the reason? If somebody asks you, say, why you are taking as 5% and 10% more, say, what reason you will give?
To account for shear deformation effects.
Excellent. Okay, so the shear deformation will be there, in these type of columns. So for that we do. Now whether the Euler's buckling load formula is applicable to built-up columns. This question also, you see, somebody asks you, say, so can I use a pi square EI by L square? So, for these built-up columns also. Now, see, this is related to the previous question itself. Okay, so now Euler's buckling load, how we have derived that pi square EI by L square, what deformations you have considered? See, what deformation was considered in deriving this pi square EI by L square? So what was the equation, you see, which you solved? See, all of you are there.
Yes, sir.
So now only your voice is coming, but others, what is happening? You see, Kishore is there, right? Kishore, then I think Yesvita, Mihir Chawla, Shankar Narayan, something was there, right? So why?
Yes,
So now, so you please answer. You see, whether Euler's buckling load formula can you use pi square EI by L square for a built-up column? Yes or no? See, what did we say? Like, you see, the Euler's buckling load is based on which one? The Euler's buckling load is based only on the bending. You see, M is equal to EI, d square y by, you see, dy square or whatever. So this was the equation, only bending. Now we have said that for a built-up column, so shear also becomes, so the governing equation of motion itself has to be changed. I showed you also, those slides where you see the equations of motion, say, they are entirely different when you include shear deformation also. Where was it? Not this one. Okay, lacing is here. No. So this is the original this one. Now when it comes to this, the lacing columns and others, say, okay. So this is the equation of the equilibrium you followed. So this equation has to be used if there is a shear deformation also. And then we have told very important thing, like you see how this graph varies the shear stiffnesses and other things. So if shear stiffnesses is very high, say, then so this quantity goes to zero kind of a thing, and finally it comes back to Euler's the buckling load. So now for lacing columns, because shear is very the dominant kind of thing, say. So Euler's buckling load, technically speaking, theoretically you can't use that pi square EI by L square for built up columns itself, because the shear deformation has not been considered. But to simplify, say, so what our code has done is, so our code says you use a pi square EI by L square only to account for this extra, this one, you see. So that's why you see we increase the slenderness ratio of lacing column by 5% and the batten column by 10%. And why lacing column, we 5%, 10% also, because lacings you have diagonal, the elements also like this. Okay, so that's why its strength will be, it can carry. So that's why I say 5%. The battens are just like a beams. Okay, so the design also you have seen. So it will have a transverse shear, longitudinal shear, bending movement, and other things will be there. So the slenderness ratio has been increased for batten column. So for answer for this question is theoretically no. Okay, but in the code, if you give so many formulas, confusions will be there. So to simplify this, say we use same formula only, but 5%, 10% to increase the slenderness ratio. Okay, so this is the reason. And now what are the steps in the design of a built-up column? So this I have already, we have seen, that is the first thing is you have to check the individual members. Okay, so whether they are fine or not, that was the first check you would have solved in the previous problem itself. Then you have to find out the spacing actually. Okay, so this is the next step. Once the spacing is found out, so equating moment of inertia in both the directions, so you find out the spacing. Then you have to design, you see, the individual members. So that's this lacings or battens or whatever, say the thickness of the lacing, and then length and the spacing between the lacings or the battens. So this has to be decided such that there will not be no local buckling or something will happen like that. Okay, so then you have to do the design of the spacing, thickness of the bar, then the connections, bolts or welding or whatever, say. So that has to be designed. So these are the basic steps in our built up column. You have already done in the tutorial and other the assignments and other things. Okay, and now how do we avoid a distortion in laced column? Question 2, tell me, how do you avoid distortion in the laced column? What you have to provide? So what is that you provide? So I have a lacing like this. So what is that you have to do to avoid distortion, say? So if we want to avoid distortion, what you have to provide? This also I showed you right in the previous long back, you see, in the slides. Okay, so everything is there in the slide itself. Now how do we avoid distortion? Where is that lacing? Yes, lacing is here. So we have said this one. Okay, and now how do we avoid a distortion? So this is what we said as a distortion of cross section. What is that you have to do in a lacing column? So to avoid this distortion, say what you have to do?
Provide a tie plate.
Excellent. So you have to provide a tie plate at the top and the bottom. Okay, so that is how you see we provide the lacing. These are tie plates. If you don't provide tie plates, say, so then you have a problem. Okay, and how do we design this tie plates? So the tie plate should be, what is the design should be same as
Battens.
Batten itself. Okay, excellent. So this is how you see you have to do this design. So now, yes. Now, what is the main purpose of lacings and battens? What lacings and battens does, whether they support the load. See, the axial whatever compression is coming on the column, say, so they support that load, or what is the main loads is carried by which members? You are having, you see, the main members. See these two channels, then we have lacing, we have, and of course if there is a battens is there. Okay, now what is the main purpose of lacings and battens? Whether they carry the main load or what is that they do?
They connect these two sections.
The main purpose of that is to keep the keep the two sections together.
Excellent, together. So that's why we don't do design. So the lacings and battens design is only for shear actual. Okay, so the transverse shear or something 2.5% and other things we have said. Now on the this one is very important. Now what does the 0.2 in the stress reduction factor indicates? You remember that 0.2, you know, in the not lacings and battens in the original formulas in the IS code reduction factors, where are they? So here we are using 0.2. You remember this one. What is this 0.2? This is 0.2. You remember the compression member in the formula. 0.2 indicates what? Now what does the 0.2 indicates? Now you have forgotten. What does that 0.2 indicates? You see this figure also. What does this point corresponds to? Now what is this 0.2? You know? See what is if it is less than 0.2, say what is your you know, the stress or whatever this FC. What is happening to your buckling? It's a short column. To get this plateau, say, okay, so that is why this 0.2 you followed. So this you should remember. Okay, the 0.2, how you know, what does these things indicates and others. So that is the most important thing. Now then how do we connect to two columns? So like one column is here, another column is here, say. Okay, so how do we connect? You see, so we use what is that? The column splices have to be there. Now what is a bearing plate? You would have done last week, right? What is a bearing plate? When you have to provide bearing plate? See, bearing plate when you have to provide?
When the columns are different sizes.
Different size. If the column is of same size, also people are putting, okay, so that the load will be distributed, you know, properly. But when the different sizes say, so then you have to provide the bearing plate. Now bearing plates are designed for what loads? Like how did we design the bearing plate previous last class? You remember this? What was the load on the bearing plate?
Flexural stresses.
Flexural stresses, but how did we get? So you, since bearing plate is a two thicknesses are there, say. So this A we take, okay, that is a difference between these two column, you know, the sizes and others. So for this, you know, we design the bearing plate, okay. So this you should remember the design things itself. Now, then shear splice. Shear splice, what do we do? It is related to here itself. So where shear splice is put up, it is attached to the at the web bits. So whenever there is a load, say the whole compressive load or whatever, it is carried by this splice plate. That is a bearing splice. Shear is carried by this. Then this, if two different sizes are there, say, so this comes into picture. Okay, so that is how this. Oh, now what is the slenderness ratio of splice plate? This is very important. What was assumption we did in the design steps? So where it was that slenderness ratio, you remember? What is the slenderness ratio of the splice plates? You see here?
Short columns.
So what is the slenderness ratio? Short column means it is slenderness ratio is
0.2 or less.
No, 0 almost you followed. Of course, 0.2 less, that is as per, but that is how we say these are assumed. Okay, so this you followed, right? So if you are able to answer, if you know able to find out the answers for all these things, say that means, you know, you people are doing fine. So other questions I don't know. You please check you know, the yourself. Okay. So anyway, so with this we will close our column. So we go to the next you know, the thing that is you see the beams basically. Okay. So now you know, so that is the next unit. Okay, so now we have done tension members, then compression members. Next comes beams. Now one thing is you know, you are increasing, but the design complexities also increases. Actually, tension members, you know, it was very simple. You see, P by A, only area was there, tensile strength, or you see that gross yielding strength or something like that. It was all very easy only. So we were looking for area was our main design variable for tension. Now when it comes to compression members, say area also came into picture. Then we had moment of inertia, radius of gyration, slenderness ratio, all those things, they came into picture. Now when it comes to beams, say, so things becomes much more complex, and here the design variables, they increase. So now for beams, say, what is the most important design variable? Now what's the
Bending
most
Section modulus.
design variable? Bending moment is fine, but there is a section model, that is this Z actual. And since here for beams is in our IS 800, we are going for limit state design, that plastic things and other things also. So here we will be having two shear moduluses also. One is the shear elastic shear modulus, plastic shear modulus, then shape factor. Many variables comes into picture here. Then the buckling of the beams, say, this also is a very, very important thing. Okay, the buckling of the beams, you see the lateral torsional buckling. Then the shear, you see the shear may be dominant. Generally in beams, what is the most dominating force? Beams are subjected to what type of what are the internal forces in the beams? You have done in mechanics, right? Whenever there is a beam given load, so what do you find out?
Shear and flexure.
Excellent. So shear force, bending moment. So here also, suppose of course among shear and bending, which is the one widely used now for design, which is the most important thing for us? Of course both are important only, but sometimes mostly you follow that bending moment only, we consider. The shear deformations or shear things are all very small, you followed, right? We neglect. That is how that plane sections remain plane, you remember, right? Because shear deformations, you see, we ignore. Of course shear stresses we find out, but generally bending moment is the most important thing for beams. But sometimes the shear also will be very, very dominant. So when the shear is also very dominant, say, so then you have to check both the cases, separate cases are in. So many things will come into beams. So the design becomes complex. Of course, it is not complex, but the steps will increase. So you may have to do so many checks, like for tension members, maybe 2 checks you would have done: gross strength, then the tensile kind of a thing. But when it comes to compressive strength, some more checks are there, like slenderness ratio and other things may be there. But when it comes to beams, so your design steps, the increases basically. Okay, that is the most important thing. So anyway, so the beam, so the coming this. So now to define what is meant by beam, say, so this is just a typical definition. It's just a structural member. So one dimension is very, very long compared to the other dimensions. So that is the most important thing in the beams. So when one dimension is longer than the other dimensions, say, so your that Euler-Bernoulli beam theory can be used. You followed it. The plane sections remain plane. And so all these assumptions you can use, and you can collapse the entire beam to a centroidal axis actual. Okay, so this is how a beam is represented. A 3D beam collapses to simple one line. Okay, so in our Euler-Bernoulli, that beam theory, and all the plane cross sections are all the points here actual. Okay, in this Euler-Bernoulli, so the plane cross sections are rigid. So this is an assumption, you see. So you do use in Euler-Bernoulli beam theory. So they are rigid connections, and right, that they remain plane, then they remain always perpendicular to the neutral axis. Say. Then your shear is also gone. So you have that M by I, that F by Y, you followed it. That formula comes into picture. So the same thing we would do. Now the sections of beams you followed it are subjected to shear and bending. So these are the two most important things on the beams. That is a bending moment, and then you see we have a shear force. Now in our steel thing, or many textbooks, if you see, people will be using variety of names. All are same only, but depending on their usage and other things people use, but the design is same. So like this word joist, some people say steel joist, you design a steel joist. So joist is nothing but a beam only. So it is just like it's a less important closely spaced beams you follow, right? We call them as, you know, the joist basically. Then we have a purlin's word is used. So purlin is also beam only, but when you are using roof trusses, right? So, you know, the cycle shed or whatever trusses are there, say in the factories and others. So we use the word, the beams are known as purlins, but the design is same only. Okay. Then we have rafter beam also. So it is also beam only, but supporting purlins is we call it as a rafter. Then lintel beam we say, all of you in your houses also, right? Whenever you are constructing, so over the door, window opening also, we use this type of lintel beams. Then girts, you know, this is also another technical word. Some cladding in industrial buildings, so girts they use. Then stringer beams also. So they use, I think, in you know, the plate deck slab and other things will be there. Then we have spandrels, you know. So there are many words which we use actually, okay, today, you know, in our construction. But all of them comes under design of a spandrel or a design of a stringer, design of a lintel, say everything same design as a beam itself. So these are all just the words which are widely used in the industry. Okay, joist, purlin. So if somebody asks you, say you design a lintel beam, so designing a lintel beam is same as this beam, whatever we are going to discuss right now. If somebody asks you to design a stringer beam or a joist, say, so steps are same only, formulas are also same only. So you have to assume all of them as ordinary followed, right? The beams itself. And one here, the most important thing is when you are having a very large size beams, say we call them as girders. Okay, the plate girder. So this, you know, comes into picture. So the design of plate girder is, you know, different. Okay, so that we will handle you know, separate unit. After these beams we will go to that one. So girders are this one, but all these things comes under the beam design only. Okay, this is the most important thing. So girder is different, beam is different. Of course, girder is also beam only, but you know, the design steps are slightly, you know, the different for the girders. So these are the from the steel tables, say we have, right, the building blocks. Okay, like I section, channel section, all other things. All of them can be used for beams. So the most important section which is widely used for beams, like in ordinary buildings and others, is the I beam. Okay, widely used, you know, the beam member. See why I sections are very popular in beams. What is the advantage of I section? See, generally, whenever you have a beams, everybody prefers I sections only. Why do we prefer I sections? For beams, why don't we do rectangular cross sections?
Higher
So why
section
do
modulus.
section modulus or moment of inertia you follow, because you know that bending stress is, you know, m by z. So you follow, right? So this matters a lot actually. So if z is very high, say, then the stress will be small. So and z depends on moment of inertia, I by y kind of thing. So this I say the moment of inertia is more, then z will be more, then stress will be less. So that's why you see these you know, these I sections are widely preferred in beams. Then sometimes the channels also we use. Okay, like I told you, right, we have a joist, purlin, rafter, and other things. So you know, ordinary purlins, if you want to design, say small you know, sheds and this one, maybe angle sections also can be used actually. But okay, so then sometimes built up sections also we do, like you see the required, the loads are very heavy, and if the section modulus also required is very large, say you may be not, we will not be getting that type of section modulus from our steel tables. So you use, you know, you do some kind of a welding, you know, you attach some you know, some other steel flat or something like that. So you make your own section, you increase its section modulus, you do. So these are all built up, you know, sections. Like this one also we use. And sometimes rolled beams, like you say two beams, say, so two I sections, you know, you join them, or you know, rolled channels, then you know, T plate and then T plates. So these are all built up sections. So variety things are used in practice. Like you see, you take angle section, you take a plate, and then you make your own you know, the beam itself. Okay, so like this, very widely things are widely used. And sometimes, you know, in our thing, you can use these type of beams also. You can see this is an I section which is not symmetric. So this flange side width is different, this flange width is different also. So this will be embedded in the concrete slab. So like that also, you know, composite sections we say. So these are also widely used for beams. Now these are some guidelines actually. Okay, some, like you say, what do you want to use, say. So there are some guidelines are available. So like for example, if you are having a span 3 to 6 meter span only, say, And let us say these are all lightly loaded beams like a roof purlin or a sheeting rail or something like that. So you can use an angle section. So this is a guideline. So this angle section can be used as a beam, if the span is not more than 3 to 6 meters or something like that. And the loads are also very, very small. So like cycle shed or maybe, where there is not much beam. So you can go for angle section. Now, if the span is 1 to 30 meters, say, then the roll dissections have to be used. Okay, so these are some guidelines are there. Now, if it is a 6 to 60 meter, very long spans and light loads are there, say. Okay, so instead of going for angle, we go for castellated beams. I will show you what do you mean by castellated beam. Now, if the span is much higher, say 10 to 100, and you have to carry a very heavy loads, say we use plate girders. So plate girder design is entirely different from beam. Okay, then if the span is much more longer, say we use this box girders. So long spans, heavy loads are there, say. So we use this box. So these are like some kind of guidelines. Okay, so which section I should use, for what purpose I should use. So there are nice guidelines are available. So this is the castellated beam. You can see here. So this is a castellated beam. So have you seen anywhere these type of beams? You can see here. So this is a beam. Inside, you have you followed it the space. Okay, so this is a castellated beam, they say. So these type of things are used, for very long spans, 6 to 60 meter, and loads are light. You can see it is only supporting, there is one asbestos sheet or some sheet above. So so these type of for very long spans. Instead of going for angle section, we go for this castellated beams also. Then there is a typical plate girder. Okay, it's a huge, for bridge decks and others we use it. And this is our box girder. Okay, so this also is used, as a beam. You have seen, right, this type. Where are you seeing this nowadays frequently? Which of them you are seeing frequently? Like metro, you have seen, right? Metro constructions, which one they are using right now? See, like in our Chennai metro, box girders, and they do, right, they manufacture piece by piece by piece. They nicely join, one by one, and then they are using. So this is widely used for, I think, what is metro and other things. Plate girders are also used like flyovers. If you go, say, to any flyover or wherever, you will see these type of structures. So castellated beams you will see in industry. Of course, it cannot carry very high load, but long spans, say. So these type of beams can be used here. And of course, the idea is very simple, because beam, the more mass should be concentrated at the edges so that your moment of inertia increases. Okay, so these are the things. Now, before going into the design of beams, say, one should have an idea of section modulus. Okay, so anyway, all of you know this one. So section modulus has to be, you should know all of you section modulus. And there are two things are there. One is elastic section modulus, which all of you know, and then plastic section modulus also. Because our design is, the limit state design, say. So this also, it becomes very important for us itself. Then another thing is, the shape factor. Okay, which is anyway the ratio between ZP by ZE kind of thing. So this also, one has to have an idea, before going into the design process. Okay, so now let us see this case. Now this is a cantilever beam. So I have a cantilever beam like this, and the concentrated load is acting here. So the same figure, say. Okay, and it is a rectangular cross section we have taken here. So this is the graph here. Okay, so now for cantilever beam, say, where is the bending moment is maximum at what place?
Joint.
At the fixed end. Okay, so that is if W is this one, L is a span. So this is a bending moment diagram. Okay, all of you know. So here the bending moment is, the maximum bending moment comes into at the joint itself. Now, if you try to plot the bending stress distribution, say, from that formula, you see M by I, you followed, right? F by Y. So stress, say, is My by I. Okay, so this is my bending stress here. So this Y, this, so if you try to plot, this bending stress and others, say. So all of, the bending stress is, like this. So top fiber compression or tension or whatever. So bottom one will be like this. So this is my bending stress distribution, neutral axis, everything all of you have heard in your mechanics of materials. Okay. So now, you see, so obviously said, so the compression portion, the tension portion, you should, so you are having a two equilibrium. So one is, the force equilibrium, say. So anyway, on this beam, there is no axial force which is acting on the beam. So obviously sigma, the F has to be 0. So which means you see the compressive thing and tension things, both of them should be, you see, same kind of a thing. So automatically you see this is a BH by A into F of I or whatever you have. Then this bending moment, say, that is a bending moment you can find out from this expression also, that is F by Z and other things also. But you can also find out, like, you see, the bending thing, say, like this one. So now before, so if you take, this is my section, say, that is Fy. So so CET BH by 4 into Fy. So the bending moment, say, so C into this lever arm basically. So this is my lever arm. So I have a centroid here, say, of this portion and this portion. So this is my the lever arm. So this becomes, you see, 2h by 3 for ordinary, the elastic case itself, and this is my BH cube by 6 actual. Okay, so this is what we call as the elastic section modulus. You can find out from like you see 2h by 3 that compressive force, and this one also you can do, or you can do that we already know, right, I by y, that expression, you see, that also one can use in the elastic domain. So here what happens is, you see, so already I told you, so like you see, as the load keeps on increasing, say, so the fibers first, so this section, the top fiber, say, if it is less than F of Y, the yield strength of the material, so the whole section will be elastic. Now once F increases equals to F of Y, that is, yielding starts, say. So the top fiber, because the stresses are very high, the top fiber, the bottom fiber, they start the yielding itself. Now as you keep on increasing the load, say, so then this yielding, you see, this propagates the stresses, they redistribute among themselves. So this whole fiber plastification, you see, it happens, and then it goes something like this. Now after you keep on increasing the load, say, after some point what happens is all the fibers would have plastified basically. Okay, the whole H by the whole beam will plastify, and obviously what happens? So the whole section is plastified. So what happens at this junction? Now what happens? We discussed long back also. What happens when the whole section is plastified? Say,
Plastic hinge is formed.
So the plastic hinge gets formed. Excellent. Okay, and then of course the beam, the collapses. So this is how you see the generally, you see, the bending failure of a beam, say, this is how it happens. So initially it will be like this, then slowly yielding starts from the top, and the stresses gets redistributed, and it comes, keep on coming down, and finally everything plastifies, plastic hinge forms. So once plastic hinge forms, then what is the definition of plastic hinge? Now what's the difference between plastic hinge and ordinary hinge? Now I have told you the definition also. Now moment is
non-zero but constant.
So ordinary hinge means bending moment 0, but plastic hinge means you have a constant bending moment actually. Okay, so that is a difference between these two. So that is how this collapses. So now this is anyway the section modulus in ordinary elastic range. Okay, so if you have to Fy, just this one, so this becomes our ordinary section modulus, that is a BH cube by 6. It's very easy, you followed it. So you find out the force. So compression tension will be, the lever arm is 2h by 3. So you multiply, automatically you will get this thing. And the area also you can easily find out the compressive areas. It is a triangle basically. Okay, so triangle areas is nothing but half of the, so this is h by 2. This is B, say, that width of the beam. So the square area will be B into rectangle, if you take B into h by 2. So triangle is half of that one. So that becomes, BH by 4 into Fy. So this is a force. So BH by 4 into Fy. And then, so you have to find out the lever arm. So lever arm is 2h by 3. So you will get BH cube by 6 actual. Okay. So this is what we call as, the elastic, the modulus, because, here not plastification has not yet started. Only the top and bottom fibers, they have reached almost very close to the yield strength. Now, when it comes to the next stage, say, slowly, the plastification has started, it has come down. Okay, so it is something like this. So the stresses are getting redistributed, and then it goes. Now, if you want to find out the section modulus, or if you want to find out the capacity, say, so now here you have to do 2 times actually. So this much portion is plastified. Okay, so this portion is plastified. So this portion is plastified, but still this is in this one. So if you want to find out the bending capacity or whatever, say you have to do 2 times, one for the plastified region, other for the elastic region. So you have combination from this, combination from that also. Same lever arm can use. So like this, you see, you can calculate. So this is a rectangular cross section, say. So this portion has plastified. Okay, so the depth of the beam is D. So this portion has plastified. This portion is still elastic actually. Okay. So now you can easily find out this. So now to find out the bending capacity of this beam, say. So now, so this is a plastified region. Okay, this is also plastified region. Okay, so you have to find out C1, T1, both of them are same anyway. So now this is multiplied by its lever arm, that is A1. Okay, so this is the component which comes from the plastic thing. Now we have elastic thing also, that is this triangle here. Okay, so one triangle here also. So this portion, say, okay, so this portion, so this also you have to find out. So the area is a C2, say, okay, and this area is a T2. So C2 multiplied by A2. So this is a A2 is a lever arm basically. So this you add the component coming from plastic region, coming from this one. So you will get the bending capacity. It is a straightforward, you see. So the compressive force, the area of this one is, so B into E into F of Y. So this is the area of this one, but area of C2, say. So this is still a triangle. Okay, so this width you have to find out, D minus 2E by 2 into B into F of Y. So this 2 comes from, you see, triangle, rectangle, say half of that one, that comes. So this is the area of C2. Now you find out the lever arm also. So A1 is D minus E and A2 is 2 by 3 into D minus 2E. So this 2 by 3 comes because you are handling a triangle kind of things. It's the centroid and other things is all of, So if you sum up these two, say, so you will get the bending capacity. So which is given by this, you see, the expression. Okay. So E is anyway the zone of, the plastic zones, the plastic zone or whatever, say. So the plastic zone depth. Okay, so this is my bending capacity of my plastic zone depth. So here then of course D is anyway the total depth of the beam and other things are there. So E is a parameter actually. So now if you see this things, how this bending capacity is depending on this depth of the plastic zone, how they are related, M and E. What's the relationship between M and depth of the plastic zone? How they are linked? You see this expression? Now how they are linking? They are a linear relationship or how they are related, both of them? Second degree. They're related?
Second degree.
Second degree or quadratic, you see, E square basically you followed, right? That's why. So what does it tells you? So what is the most important thing we'll find out here? So if you see these expressions, how bending moment is varying in the beam for cantilever? Linearly, but plastic hinge, that depth, say depth of that hinge or whatever that plastic region, how it is varying with bending moment? Quadratic. So you can see here, this is a quadratic thing. You followed. So this, this is how you see it handles. So basically what happens in a cantilever beam is the bending moment is very, very high at this place. So here the hinge forms first near the portion. But before hinge has formed, say, automatically this plastic region also spreads actually. Okay, it spreads like this in this direction. So here, so this place or this place, if you see, say, so the depth of the plastic zone basically, that is that E. So this E, whatever you are having here, so automatically here, that what is the depth of the plastic zone here at this section at the fixed E, and what is the depth?
By whole thing by 2.
Whole thing has got plastified. You followed, right? So this is how is. So now that is anyway, that is this thing. So now if you come to this region, say, so everything has plastified. It is very simple. So the area is nothing but now B into H by 2 itself. Okay, the area of compressive portion B into H by 2, and then you find out the lever arm, say. Okay, between these two, the lever arm you just find out. So finally this turns out to be, you see, BH squared by 4. So Fy into Zp. So Zp is, you see, BH squared by 4 actually. This is a very important thing. Now Ze, that is elastic section modulus, that is before yielding, say, that is this portion. Okay, so we got as what was the expression? BH cube by 6 basically. Okay, BH cube by 6. So this is elastic section modulus. This is a plastic section modulus. So the ratio of these two will give me of the shape factor. Is a very, very important concept in the steel design, essentially for the beams. So what is now we tell me.
Sir, ZP and ZD are not dimensionally in the same number.
So they are same number, right? See, BH
BH
square
square
before, here also
and
BH.
BH cube. Oh, okay. No, you wrote BH.
Square. See here, here I think. No, somewhere I think there is a mistake has happened.
Okay, sir.
Somewhere, but anyway, finally they will be same only. So we will be, it should be same only. Okay. See, BH by 2 is the area. Then somewhere I think we missed. But their dimensional is same only. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Second. See, BD square by 6 only. I think there maybe we made a no. Sorry, here I think there is a mistake. Okay. See, BH cube by the moment of inertia is what? BH cube by 12, right?
Yes.
See, here there is a problem. See, BH is there, 2H or BH square. Okay. I think textbook I copied there. Fellow maybe mistake. BH square by 6 only. Okay. So this is wrong. No, BH square by 6 only. So finally, the shape factor is how much we have got as 1.5. Now you tell me what is that, what does it tells us? Shape factor is 1.5. So physically, what is your comment here? So what does it tells you? The plastic one is more than the section one. So plastic one is ZP. So ZP is 1.5 times ZD. So what does it tells you physically meaning of this one?
Plastic hinge moment is 1.5 times the moment.
So that means a beam has how much extra strength?
Half of the elastic.
50%. Okay, so 50%. So the beam generally, as already I told you, right? Our problem is, what is meant by failure for us? See, for steel, we have drawn this diagram, right? It goes something like this. We had elastic Fy was there, then strain hardening and other things we have seen. But anyway, we are restricting ourselves to Fy itself because the serviceability, that criteria also comes into picture. So although the elastic thing, whatever, if you are doing designs, you have already 50% reserve strength is there in the the rectangular cross section. That is how it has to be interpreted. So the shape factor tells you the reserve strength or the extra strength before the plastification or whatever you followed, right? So that is how we say this shape factor becomes very, very important, and it tells you the unreserved reserved strength in the beam, you see, after yielding has started. So very, very important. And here, as already I told you, how the hinge plastic hinge depth varies now. So this is the same thing. Now it is a simply supported beam. Okay. A concentrated load at the center. So this is a bending one diagram. All of that's a linear, the bending one diagram here. So now you see how the hinge is varying, how the hinge varies with bending moment. Now depth of the hinge, that is E. So E, you followed it. E, how it varies, we have seen it varies in a quadratic fashion. And then you also can find out the yield zone, the length of the yield zone. Of course, this is not so important, but length of the yield zone, say, that is how much portion, if the plastic hinge forms here, say, so because plastic hinge forms here, the whole section gets plastified, but at the same point of time, so plastification also slowly spreads along the length also. So once everything gets plastified, say, so you can find out the width of this zone also. It's very easy, you can find out, you see, by using the equal triangles and other things also. So this length of the plastic zone is, you followed it, L by 3 approximately. Okay, for simply supported beam, you can easily find out, you see. So you can find out, that similar triangles, MP by ME, all of So what is MP by ME? So this is Fy into Zp. This is Fy into Zd. So this cancels Zp by Zd for rectangular cross section. So what is Zp by Zda? Now for rectangular cross section, what is Zp by Zd? That is shape factor. Yes,
1.5.
1.5. So you can easily find out actually. Okay, so like where the yielding starts, and then you can easily calculate. Approximately it turns out to be L by 3. That is the length of the yield zone for this cross section itself. So now if you are having a T section, say, now how do we find out my elastic section modulus? How do I find out my plastic section modulus also? Because as I told you, right, in our steel things, I sections are there, rectangular cross sections, we don't even use in steel. You follow it because uneconomical or something. So T sections, I sections we use. So if you take in T sections, it is not a symmetric, right? The area is not this one or something like that. So now generally what happens is because our C has to be equal to T, say the compressive zone, tension zone, both have to be equal kind of a thing. So generally this is nothing but, and when there is a plastification, say slowly everything gets plastified. So this plastic axis, so this generally neutral axis you would have heard. So neutral axis means where stresses are. What do you mean by neutral axis? See in your mechanics of materials, what do you mean by neutral axis?
Zero stress.
Zero stress.
Elastic.
This is a zero stress we call neutral axis. But when it doing the plastic design, say, so now this portion you followed, right? The whole section has got plastified, and this area, that is a compressive force here, the tensile forces, both of them have to be same kind of a thing you should get. Okay, so C should be same as T itself. So this plastic axis we call this one. So this is also known as the equal area axis also. Okay, so this is also equal area axis also, someone plastic axis. So plastic axis means it is not stress zero or something like that, but the area is same on the top and the bottom. So this is the meaning of this expression. Okay, so the area is you followed, right? So this area, say both of them are same. So this we call as the plastic axis. So plastic axis, it may be similar to neutral axis also, some cross sections, but the area above, area below has to be same actually, because anyway the force equilibrium has to get satisfied. So this has to be same. So now for T sections, say, so now you are having area. So A1 is this one, then A2 we have, then A3 you followed, right? The area neutral axis is here. All of you know this one. So now to find out this one, say the tension has to be same as the compression. Of course, this problem is little bit complex because the yield stress in tension, yield stress in compression is also different. But in steel, both of them will be same only. Just for the the hypothetical case we are just showing. So this is from the force equilibrium. The top and bottom has to be same. So which means the Fy and the tensile yield strength multiplied by area in tension, compressive this one multiplied by area in the compression. So they have to be same. Suppose if both of them are same, say Fyt, Fyc, of course they are same only. Then obviously you see At is equal to Ac. So this is possible only the total area, say, of the material divided by 2. So this is what we call as the plastic axis. Okay, so the area says, so now if I want to find out the plastic axis, what I have to do is, so I know the total area of my material. So now I have to find out the place where the area becomes exactly, you see, the half. Okay, the top and bottom area should be exactly same. So this becomes automatically the plastic axis. So this is how we locate plastic axis for any given cross section. So you know the total area divided by 2. Now you find out, okay, so where from the depth from here, say, okay, how much will be the depth such that the top area, the bottom area has to be same. So there is a guideline. Now once I know this plastic axis, that is the plastic axis or the equal area axis, now I find out my this the section modulus, plastic section modulus, and other things. So for T sections, I have a web, I have a flange, you followed, right? So I will be having, you see, the C1 will be there, then I have C2 will be there, and we have this tensile things will be there. So we write like this. So C1 into Y1 bar, that is a lever arm from the equal area axis. Then C2 into Y2 bar. So this also we take here. Then we have T times, you see, Y3 bar itself. See, previously what we were doing here when the sections was symmetric. So what was our lever arm? Can you see here? The lever arm was when the things were symmetric, how did we calculate? See, compression was there, tension was there. Lever arm was simply we used to say C into A. That is how we calculate actually. A is nothing but distance between C and T. But now because it's a T section, because of symmetry and other issues are there. So now you can see the lever arms or whatever are just computed from the equal area axis itself. Okay, so C1 into Y1 bar, C2 into Y2, T into Y3 bar because of unsymmetry or whatever in this things. So this you will find out A1 into Y1 bar, A2, FYC, FYT. So these are our terms act. And of course, if YC, if FYC yield strength is same in tension as well as in the compression, say, so then finally, you can do like this, and A by 2 this expression comes, and ZP into F of Y. So this is how we calculate the plastic section modulus for these sections. Now for I section, say, which is the most important for us. So it is very simple. But the only thing is, because the flange area is different, web area is different, so we have a issue. So this is a flange area. Okay, so this is my flange area. Then this is my the web area or whatever the total. So this is my total compressive forces. So C2, then C1. Okay, so the my becomes so A1 into Y1 bar. Okay, that is the area. Then A2 into Y2 bar multiplied by Fy. So C1 is anyway Fy into A1. And C2 is Fy into A2, okay, the web portion. So plus we have the A3 Y3 bar and A4 Y4 bar. If it is a symmetric thing, then both of them will be same, like A1 will be same as the A3, A2 will be same as A4 also. Okay, so this also you can find out. Or you can do this way, if it is symmetric cross sections, instead of taking Y1 bar, Y2 bar, so these things have been taken from the this axis, that is a equal area axis. Otherwise you can take, if it is symmetric, say, so you can take simply C1 into T1. This distance also you can take directly. But if it is not unsymmetric, say, then you have to do individually, the movement about this equal area axis. So if you substitute all those breadth of the flange, width of the flange, and other things, so this turns out to be my plastic section modulus for an I section. So these for ZZ axis. This is for other, the direction. So this axis also you can easily find out along YY axis, say, okay. So this also same concept. So top one, bottom one, you nicely divide, and then you find out the contributions. So this is my section modulus in other direction also. And these are the shape factors. So already, of course, in the steel code they don't give, but if you see any textbook, say, Duggal book or any textbook, in the appendix they give, okay, these shape factors also. So for all I sections, say, what are the shape factors? Can you see here? Shape factors lie from where to where? See, what's the shape factor for MB 100, ISMB 100B? What's the shape factor? Now, what's the shape factor here?
1.26.
1.12. What do you mean by this one? How much reserve strength it has?
13%. 12%.
But rectangular cross section?
50%.
50% it has. Now you can see the shape factor tells you how much reserve extra strength it has. Okay. Now suppose if you take circular cross section, say solid circle, its shape factor is 1.7. You follow. Then if you take a diamond, say this type of cross section, a square only, A. Okay, this cross section is like this. Its shape factor will be, and it is solid only. So for solid circular cross section, this will be 2 basically. You followed, almost double it will be also. So these are for the I sections. For channels also, one can easily calculate. They are given in the text. You can also calculate from those, the expressions. So 1.17, 1.15 like that. You see these numbers comes into picture. So the shape factor is a very, very important design variable for beams. Apart from, of course, plastic section modulus is there. But the ratio of plastic section modulus to elastic section modulus gives me this shape factor. So this is a very, very important thing which design variable we will be using in our design. Okay, so I will stop here. We will continue in our next class. Yes. Okay. So if you have any questions, you can ask.